We have a few questions about China because Macron has traveled to China this week and he has urged the European leaders to stay together and basically stay together to put something against the growing China power in the world. Is this a good sign?
Now, first of all, we have to realize one thing. China has a long-term strategy, politically, geostrategically, and economically. If you look at the Road and Belt Initiative, if you look at huge investments in different parts of the world, if you look at resources, they are going to look in different parts of the world and so on. So there's a long-term strategy. And the question is, does Europe have a strategy? Does the Americans have a strategy? Do we have a common strategy to go along with this challenge? This is the main question. So my answer is very clear. Yes, we need an answer. We need an answer geostrategically, but also economically, and that is what President Macron said. And I think this is absolutely right. And we have to work together also with the Americans. What could be an answer in infrastructure, in investment, and all those things. And the second part is, of course, China wants to be a market economy, and now they have to implement market rules. And so far, this is not the truth. So there must be further discussions with China on the following question: that we want to have a reciprocity, that we want to have a level playing field, that we want to have the same framework that Chinese companies get in Europe for European companies or American companies in China. So that's a second part that's very, very important, and that is what President Macron made clear during his visit in China.
But Macron also said that he really would like to talk especially to the Germans. And as there is a strong German-French axis, do you expect this, or could this be something of a joint German-French project over the next month?
I think we need a European answer. It's not only about Germany and France. Of course, we are very important. Both are very important players within the European Union, and we have to work together. By the way, he made this very clear when he was talking about the investment-proof mechanism that we have just implemented, or we are going to implement, because we are in the legislation process in the European Parliament. And he made very clear that he's supporting this initiative, and that he thinks this is of strategic importance, because so far we can't. Because of European legislation, we can't look in detail in certain investment coming from different parts of the world, including China. And what we wanted, and that was a German, French, Italian initiative, that we want to have, let's say, a legal base for deeper evaluations of these kind of investments, and the possibility to say no to these kind of investments. So that's very, very important, and I think it's urgent that we finalize this in 2018.
And Macron also asked for a financing facility. Europe should set up something to basically counter the economic investment power of China by setting up its own fund. Is this a good idea, or do you think this is going too far?
The question is, what kind of funding are we talking about? Are there European venture capital funds? Are there private funds? Or are these public funds? And of course, there are also private funds who do investment not only in Europe but also in other parts of the world. And yes, we need capacities in the private sector that European companies and European investments can take place also in other parts of the world. That's very, very important, because we are in a new period of economic development. As we can see, China is the biggest exporter of the world. It's going to become the biggest economy of the world. And therefore, is doing, as I said, geostrategic things on investment side, on resources, also on the question of security and military things. And there must be also an answer to this from the European side, and by the way, also from the American side.
And on the European side, you mentioned the review of the investment, Chinese investment. Is this process going at right speed, or do you think there's still something lacking on the European level? What is needed at the moment?
Yeah, first of all, I think it was a great step forward that Commissioner President Juncker took this in his speech on the State of the Union. He made very clear that he and the Commission is going to support this initiative. By the way, this was not always true in the past. Let's say at least for the whole Commission. And now the President of the Commission is very, very clear. Second, we are now in the process of normal legislation process, so that goes now is in the Parliament, in the European Parliament, and then of course that's the rule in democracy that now that the Parliament is going to look at this. And it's also true there are still member states who are, let's say, reluctant because they fear two things: maybe a too big influence on the Commission side, and second, they fear that this might be understood as a protectionist signal. Mm. So on both sides, it's not true. By the way, we want very clear, and that's the content of the German, French, and Italian proposal, that we get a legal base within the European legislation process, but the decision, what kind of evaluation, how deep is the evaluation, and the decision if this investment is going to be allowed has to take place in the member state. So that's very, very important. And so the member state, each member state can decide if he's going to use this instrument or if he doesn't like to do this. So that's a decision then on in the member state. So that's very, very important. And by the way, as long as there's no reciprocity, if you look at China, I think we have to look. And also we have to protect public financing, because if you look at certain companies, huge funds and huge support has been given to develop certain technologies in certain companies. So it's public money in there, and this is going to be bought by companies outside of Europe or outside. Let's say between US and Germany, there's, from our point of view, no problem. But if this is going to happen, we have also to look at these investments from the public side. And so there are good arguments. And now we have to speed up. And as I said, hopefully we are going to finalize this in 2018. If I could have a wish at the beginning of the year, let's finalize this till the mid of 2018. This would be a huge step forward.
You mentioned that there are divisions also within Europe. There is always, every year, there is, for example, the 116 meeting with Eastern European countries and China. Is this something you're concerned about?
No, not really. Of course, discussions between countries, different parts of Europe, and China and other parts of the world, this is fine. There must be, let's say, there must be these kind of talks, because we have to find different ways of working together. And the base of working together is talking to each other, looking at common ground. But what we have to look at, if certain investments by whomsoever in certain countries, if this is going to influence their decisions they have to take within the European Union. So we have to look at this in detail, and because we have, at the end, of course, we have to look at our national state. But we have also to look on the interest, or what's in the interest of the European Union. And we have to balance this. And some member states, if I might say, sometimes forget about the second principle, that they also have to take the decision that's in the interest of the whole European Union.
Are there certain countries you have in mind when you're saying that some countries...
To whom it may concern, is maybe my answer. To whom it may concern, because I think it's not serious now to talk about countries from Germany public, but everyone who is relevant for this question knows what I'm talking about.
And also the trade relationships between China and the US has been strained over the past years, do you see that China is changing as a result of this, also its trade balance with Europe? Do you see more investment and interest of China in Europe now as a result of this?
Of course, in the last years, Chinese direct investments in Europe and also in Germany grew. But to give you a number, German direct investments in China is about 70 billion euros. Chinese direct investments in Germany are 2.2 billion. But, and we have to look at this, is increasing. And of course, this is going to in very strategic sectors, high-tech sectors, energy sectors, and so on. And this has to be looked at in detail. We want to be an open economy. Of course, it's also good to have, let's say, Chinese investors in Germany if they are interested in Germany, in the companies in Germany, and if they have the will to develop these countries and to invest in these countries, in these companies here in Germany. The problem is going to become if there's only interest to have, let's say, technology flow from Germany to China. And of course, if there are security questions a part of the problem or a part of this case. So this has been looked at in detail, and then we can take decision. By the way, in the last year, I think 2017, we had 12 to 15 investments, and we have looked at them, and there was no problem on our side to agree on these investments. But there will be, and there might be, others where we have to look in detail. Look at the case of Aixtron, where also the American government made clear, because of security reasons, that this is not a case that should be allowed. And at the end, the Chinese investor, retreated from his interest. So we have to look. So it's not a question of yes or no. It's a question of a case by case study and evaluation.
And then China has now signaled or said that they are ready to buy Airbus machines.
Fine.
So this is a positive sign also for Europe and the trade relationship.
Yeah, Airbus is a good product. Airbus is one of the leading companies in the building aeroplanes. So, of course, this is a good signal. This is not only to do, let's say, with relations. It's also something to do, let's say, that this is a good product. And if you look at the Chinese market, these are 1.2 or 1.3 billion people. And of course, they have big hubs. And for these big hubs, go from Beijing, Shanghai, to other big destinations in the world, so it makes sense to have also the capacities. And one of those aeroplanes who have the highest capacities, the A380. So it makes sense to have this kind of investment. This is not always politics. This is something to do with the development of the of the whole market and the whole demand on capacities on the Chinese market.
One last question. Germany has launched a review of the Cortesa deal. Where do we stand? Is this something Germany could block?
Now, as always, before we decide, we look at the details. So we need more information about, let's say, Cortesa and what kind of the products. We need more information about the investor who is interested. And, of course, we have to look at security question. And if this is finalized, we will take a decision. That's the normal procedure. And in all cases, we followed these procedures, and we will do this in this case as well.